Ivo, you can hear me? I can't hear you. You're on mute.
I know. It told me to be on mute until we're on air.
Instead of on loudspeaker. We are now on air. Nice to see you, Ivo. Thank you ever so much for doing this talk for Conscious Isolation, and
My pleasure.
Which is in collaboration with University of East London, of course. So I'm going to do the short introduction. Ivo is an architect and sculptor that has won international prestigious awards nationwide and internationally. Ivo was selected as one of 20 young designers to shape the future of design. Ivo founded and runs, now I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but JeJu Studio?
It's how you want to pronounce it. In Polish, you would pronounce it JeJu Studio, but yeah, it's probably internationally it's going to be read as JeJu Studio, JeJu Studio. It kind of comes from the island in South Korea, which is pronounced in English Jeju. Jeju in Polish is a funny word that means something, but just do it whatever way you want.
Okay, thank you for your kind mentality, Ivo. So JeJu Studio and architectural practice, known for a broad spectrum of projects from objects to urban master plans. He is an author of giant, widely published totems, public sculptures in Polish, Poznan.
Yeah.
In Poland, as well as Long Live the Palm installation in Agda, Portugal, which was fantastic. And obviously I know very well, seeing that I was out there, and that's where we met. Anyway, please, Ivo, take it away. Thank you ever so much once again.
Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to this initiative. And I'll take around 45 to an hour of your time. And let's start with me probably sharing the screen. That's what I was supposed to do. All right. Is it okay? Can you see the slide? Okay, you guys are muted, so yes, okay, perfect. So as it was said, my name is Iwo Borkowicz, and I invite you for this lecture that I called Former Elements in New Assemblage. I am half of the JeJu Studio that was founded roughly 3 years ago with Adam, that you can see on the other chair. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about our projects on different types of projects, and our studio tries to be versatile and diverse in what we are doing. We're based in Poland at the moment, in Wrocław and in Poznań, as Adam lives there in Wrocław and I live in Poznań. You can see those small symbols on the bottom of the screen. I want to highlight the first two you probably all understand. The third one, the white with the red sign in the middle, is a sign of us supporting the women's strikes in Poland at the moment. Yeah, this is important for us. So everybody, if you haven't heard, read up and support if you can. It's an important cause. So we're dealing with different types of scales, from smaller projects like this one we recently did for like an outdoor spa next to a lake that we designed for a hotel nearby in a beautiful natural surrounding. I was inspired by a couple of things, most of all the Alvar's Auto funky shapes of, for example, his glass products. We deal with bigger scale like buildings. This is, for example, a building that we won a competition with for this big building in the middle of a park that we actually decided to kind of structure as a park pavilion with the building on top of that, so we could kind of walk underneath the building. There'll be like kiosks and stuff, and then the building was put on top of that. So the bigger scale as well. For example, we sometimes deal with indoor stuff, like this was, for example, a set design that we did for a video shoot, for a commercial clip. So we designed this weird abstract huge volumes that were then built inside of this big warehouse where they shot the commercial. And as well as already was mentioned by Samuel, me personally, I'm also very interested in sculptural work and objects in public space. This one is the Long Live the Palm mentioned already, the installation that I built with Ola Korbańska this summer in Portugal, and I'm going to talk about this one a little bit more at the end. But let's jump into why did I call that lecture what I called it. Like where does this quote? Actually, it's a quote. It comes from this quite an interesting story. This gentleman on the picture here is called Robert Kearns, and he invented this thing called intermittent wipers. So those wipers that can work in different speeds depending on how fast you drive or how strong the rain is. And automotive companies wanted that invention, but they didn't want to pay for it. And after a couple of years, they actually plagiarized it from him, stole the invention from him, all of them actually, all American big automotive companies. And he spent like half of his life fighting them in court. And the automotive industry said, as the thing he constructed was built out of off-shelf components, of already existing elements, it's not an invention. So they say there was no flash of genius. That was their defense. So they claimed it's not an invention, but to the contrary, and I feel very rightfully, the court ruling said that it's idle to say that combinations of old elements cannot be inventions. And I really find that very, very important to what I do when I design and when I create, because most of the things I do end up being actually just collages or new ways of arranging existing elements in a sometimes exciting, sometimes innovative, sometimes beautiful, sometimes stupid, but in some way. That the connection between those things is what is the creation, not the things themselves. And this is just my observation on how I like to work. So I'm going to show you now some of my projects and some of our projects from the JeJu Studio that kind of show that quality. I'm going to start with the research project actually that I've done as my master's thesis that kind of gave me a little bit of an international attention as it won a couple of big prizes, and it allowed me to start the studio with Adam. So I spent a couple of months in Havana. It's a very dynamically changing place. It was in 2016, so it was the year that the American embassy reopened, that there was the first opening of a public internet hotspot on the island, and I was there that day. So there's a lot of things happening, and it was very exciting, but at the same time, you could see a huge amount of problems. One of the biggest ones for the island is the housing shortage, and it's not a new crisis for them. It's before the revolution or after the revolution. This problem was addressed with any major success, and people are really like struggling with it. They're moving into abandoned ruins to kind of trying to make it their home. And you have to understand that Cuba is a communistic regime, and housing is considered a right there. Everybody has a right to housing, but almost 1/3 of the population is actually awaiting housing, and they're just pushed into already overcrowded houses, leading to very unhealthy living conditions and densities, and often collapses of buildings. And parallel to that, there is a big touristic boom happening on the island, and a big hotel shortage is visible, which works in a different way, not because of financial issues. And So my research and my design proposal focused on Havana Vieja, so the oldest and the second densest housing district of the island, the Old Town. It was recently flooded again, and it has a very big problem with deterioration of the urban fabric already. So these things are not going towards actually, like it's creating more and more problems. But the biggest threat, in my opinion, to the original character of this district is the massive touristic pressure that leads to rapid gentrification of this area and will soon drive, and it's already driving, original inhabitants of Havana Vieja to the outskirts of the city. That would cut them off from being a part of this lucrative touristic economy that is lifting up that area. Cuba is changing, and it's changing now. So that's why this was the first reason why I decided that this project needs to work with already existing elements in order for it to be possible to realize as soon as possible. Because if we use already existing elements, we're quite sure that we can kind of grab them all off shelf and go. There's no hypothetical element to it, or there's much less of the unknown. So Cubans can't build nor renovate houses simply because they don't have the money to do so. But on the other hand, the hotel industry does not suffer from financial issues. It's just not allowed to grow freely, especially in Havana Vieja, because tourism, if invited on wrong terms, can be very dangerous. And Cuban authorities understand that. So I proposed that one could imagine buildings in areas attracting tourists that would consist both of regular flats for Cubans and a proportionate number of hotel units weaved into them that would kind of earn money to pay off for the loan taken for the construction of the building itself. You can understand like the boom, touristic boom to go to Cuba for holidays is now going to peak actually soonish in a couple of years. And then it's going to decline and stabilize. So if we were to build enough hotels to supply the peak demand, it's not a sustainable model, because after some years or decades, we would have a lot of hotels that are under used. So that's why my model also is, I think, much more suited to this changing dynamic of that industry. And here I'm going to show you a couple of these already existing off-shelf elements that kind of build up this development model. Cuba has a very strong culture of cooperatives that was cherished there for the last couple of decades after the revolution, especially. There's a new self-employed sector of the economy since 2012, if I'm not mistaken, or 13. Cubans are allowed to kind of start very small private businesses. Political reality is that as such the Cuban government prefers that everybody gets a little instead of one group getting a lot. That's why the dispersed tourism that I'm proposing is something that I could like. And Office of the City Historian is a very interesting thing, that the district of the old town of Havana, the Havana Vieja, kind of has its own laws. It has different laws than the rest of the country, and they pioneered the way, kind of this idea of taking the touristic income and pumping it into social investments, but they didn't yet do it with housing. It was mostly done with hospitals and elderly houses and schools, for example, and universities. But this idea of mine kind of could widen it up and open it up for housing investments as well. And the Casa Particular system. This is a system of kind of Airbnb in Cuba, but it was done since 1997, where Cubans kind of could legally rent out the rooms for tourists for some extra income. And it's very important that this is not only a financial model, but it also kind of changes the perspective. It's no longer a tourist and a hotel worker. It's more like a guest-host situation. So I think it's also socially very healthy. This project is quite wide. There's a lot of these elements that I put together. I'm gonna speed up a little bit on this one because it's very architectural, and I know you guys are mostly coming from a more artistic background. But the idea was just to balance 70 square meters of social housing with 20 square meters of guest room and multiply it. So build social housing with hotel units weaved into them that will pay off the loan for the construction of the building. And with today's prices for hotel units and with just 50% of capacity every year, these kind of buildings would pay themselves really quickly, like under 7 years. And then, as you see, Havana Vieja has a lot of these collapsed buildings, empty plots. We could build them there and not only help Cubans to be kind of connected to the lucrative economy of tourism, but also kind of reconstruct the old town of Havana at the same time. So these plots were addressed with kind of these models, prototypes that I designed for different shapes, sizes, to check how this idea can work spatially. And it's quite a it's straightforward, very easy. These buildings are kind of also working with Cuban handcraft and passive cooling methods, and then other ideas that, again, I took off shelf and tried to kind of just figure out which puzzles are gonna work best. Like, for example, Cuban social life happens on the street. So each building got like this front colonnade on the bottom, on the front of the building, that during the day can be used by street vendors because they don't have actually a proper place to stay in the old town. But then in the afternoon, these places would turn into these zones where you can play domino or just hang out. Spatially very simple. This is for an example of a plan. You can imagine that you have 2 apartments, one here, and 2 hotel units in the middle. And after 7 years, after the loan is paid off, if those families decide that they no longer want to continue that kind of business, they can either create a 3rd apartment and sell it off, or they could incorporate it into their apartment. When the family is growing, they might need more space. Very simple, no structural changes, just you move a door here and there, and these things can kind of change back and forth between tourism and housing and help to deal with those 2 shortages of hotel units and housing in a more dynamic way. Again, just taking aesthetically even elements from Cuban architecture that I found the most interesting and putting them back together in a new assemblage that this thought could work nicely. This was the first project that I did this way, that I was looking just for puzzles that I could rearrange in a new way to create new quality, for example, here, new tools to address a kind of social-political problem. I found it to be a successful one. For example, with totems, so the sculptures that I've built with Alicia Biała, an artist, with her in Poznan, you can also see these traits of kind of puzzle play as well. So Alicia was invited to deal with this space that you can see here on the picture, this passage underneath the building, and then she invited me to join her on conceptualizing and then realizing that project. So this is a passage that leads from a kind of big, busy street in Poznan next to International Fair, quite in the center of the city, into a smaller enclosed space of a small plaza called Art Bay, because it's between 2 buildings operated by people that appreciate art, and one is a historic building, one is a new MVRDV, here the one on the left hand side, the black one. Skyscraper, because Poznan is not that high, but it's pretty though, doesn't matter. It's a space where art is exhibited, and this entrance wasn't very, it wasn't kind of showing that this is a space that you should go in and explore because there's something interesting happening. So they asked us to figure out how to improve that and how to create quality to that dark passage. So the first thing you see is this vertical structural element. That was the first puzzle. The second one was Alicia herself. We looked through her work, and a lot of her work wraps around like these very dense patterns and sometimes colorful patterns. Here, I recommend you to visit her website. There's quite a lot of that very interesting stuff. The third puzzle was we had this ongoing conversation that we wanted it to be quite engaged. It was supposed to stay there for quite a while. roughly 10 years. That was the suggestion, that it should stay there for 10 years, and then they might invite another artist to change it to something else. So both me and Alicia are very kind of engaged in I would say, environmental activism or the conversation about the state of our environment. And the vertical elements in the passage also kind of connected with this totem idea of where the tribes for like ages build these vertical structures that would symbolize the relation between us and nature. Like the totem next to a river was a god of a river, and the totem on the mountain was the gods of mountains. So what we asked ourselves, what would be the meaning of a totem placed there? And then we said it's the same. It's our relation to the surrounding. As we know, our relation with the surrounding at the moment is pretty problematic. So we just kind of went with that, and we went through a lot of data. It's a very data-driven project, because we decided that formally the shapes and the sizes, the proportions of those sculptures are going to be just representation of data. So we went through a lot of different topics, the environmental ones the most, and we chose a couple of them, and then took data from those topics and translated it into kind of three-dimensional graphs. For example, one totem that speaks about plastic is just 4 volumes saying the whole sculpture is all the plastic that we've produced in history. The blue part is the one that we disposed of. The red one is what we burned. The green one is still in use, and only the small yellow volume in the middle is what we recycled. And we wrapped these sculptures, these totems, around the structural elements. And this is the outcome. They are almost 9 meters tall, made out of wood and hand painted. It's 400 square meters of hand painted surfaces. We were painting it for 3 months with a big group of volunteers, and organized a lot of like video screenings and meetings in the workshop every weekend to talk about environment alongside the work. So we have topics like quality of air, deforestation, overfishing, disappearance of wildlife, plastic, as I already mentioned, and here in the back is our relation to the environment, our influence on the environment via the choice of the diets that we follow. Yeah, and they are. We're pretty happy with them, and the project is growing. We're hopefully gonna build more in different cities. This year we built this summer another one like that in Portugal. You can scan each sculpture to get into the website that will explain everything to you. Like what is that sculpture about? You get the links, you get the research. You can go as that deep as you want. And you can see that these are very colorful. So it's kind of like a Trojan horse. It guides, like it haunts, like it. You go in because it's exciting, it's fun, it's colorful, but then when you start reading what it means, or a friend tells you, do you know that these actually, it's kind of like a juxtaposition of these two. But we wanted it to be tempting and then kind of surprising later on. Yeah, these ones are, for example, the ones we built in Portugal this summer for Dos Canais festival in Aveiro. Back to architectural scale, again, even in small, quite basic architectural projects where you can see the same pattern. We're kind of just figuring out which couple of elements to focus on and make them into a project. For example, this was kind of like an late 80s construction of like a barn that some horses lived in on a farm, and the owner, new owner of the farm, they don't have horses. They wanted to kind of transform it into a place for like dining and some conferences and the kind of multifunctional a little bit space. And they wanted to add some storage and just change the function of it. It wasn't a very interesting building, and it was very poorly built out of like mostly cardboard and metal pipes that were not strong enough structurally, actually. But we decided we for sure are still going to try to find quality that we want to keep, even if it's not that good. So we stripped it, we took the wall off, and what we were left with was the structure, the vertical metal elements. And we consulted with a structural engineer of ours, and he said, these are not strong enough. You have to reinforce it. So we could, kind of reinforce it in multiple ways. But what we decided is that we wanted to keep that kind of proof of that, how weak it was and what it was, and reinforce it with a different material to show both sides of the history. The original metal structure, and we reinforced it with the wooden structure. And as the program was bigger than the building itself, we had to make the building bigger. We decided to make it longer, so we prolonged it with the wooden structure. So we go from new wooden dense structure to from the right to the left to the metal structure, and kind of create this gradient of these two stories, the new and the old structure, being very visible. We had to make the building longer because of the program, so the roof also had to be made longer. Again, we went with the same gradient with new tiles, with roof tiles in a different color. And yeah, it's quite a simple project, but I think the narrative of trying to find even in a not very interesting building a quality that you can connect to another idea, and the something that happens between them becomes the story. This is still under construction. It got halted due to financial issues of the investor, but I will show you. There's one more funky thing inside. So the function of the building kind of follows the structural density. So the most open part of the building, where the structure is the widest, the most farthest from them apart, is the most public. So you go from the event space through a bar, through a kitchen, to storage area, which has the densest, most hidden function, seen from the inside out as well. So, as I said, this kind of is on hold at the moment. This is what you can see when we took the wall out. This is the structure that we discovered, kind of, and this is going to be reinforced with the wooden structure and hopefully finished next year. We had to add a lot of functions inside, but we wanted to keep spatially this typological shape, and we didn't want to kind of lose it. So we decided to take all the functions and put them in the middle of the building and not to touch walls. So we ended up with this box sitting in the middle of the barn. The box where you have the bar and the toilet and the kitchen kind of grouped together. And then we asked ourselves, what is a box, big box, sitting in the middle of a barn? And of course, quite a simple, funky, I think, connotation. It's a haystack. So the whole box is going to be built out of kind of hay. It's going to be actually aquariums, kind of with hay inside. But it is a haystack in the middle of a barn that you go into when you want to go to the toilet or buy something from a bar. And to make it a bit more funny, we added a fireplace in a haystack, because why not? Another one I'm going to share is a project that we're now working on in Tanzania, in Ulayankulu refugee settlement. So I'm a graduate from a school called Wayere, like primary and secondary level school. And this school started in the 90s as a scout group that also was like a kids theater group, and then morphed into becoming a primary school. And the theater theme remained. And until today, it's a school that teaches kids all the basic stuff that you need program-wise to be a proper school. This school also kind of uses theater classes to teach you qualities like bravery, honesty, empathy. It's a beautiful, beautiful program of education for kids. And they didn't have a building to start the school in. They got a piece of land from the city, but they had no funds and no building. So this building that you see here on the picture, and there are the pictures from the construction, was actually a gift from Netherlands, because they had a temporary school there while they were refurbishing the real one in Eindhoven. And after they refurbished that school, they donated the the temporary school, and it was brought on tracks in '90s to Poland and assembled, and it's being used still continuously till today. So 20 years later now, exactly 24 years later, when the first gift from Netherlands came to Poland, and we got to enjoy education for so many years in this building, thanks to that, we decided as a school to create a foundation. I'm saying we now because I'm a part of foundation at the moment, but yeah, I joined the foundation as an architect after they already decided that there's enough power and this is the time to pass the gesture along. And the location of the refugee settlement in Kulu, Tanzania, was chosen to kind of pass the gesture along and build a school for them. So I was invited to design that school. It was mostly because at this similar time I finished my Havana project, which was widely published, and I was a graduate of that primary school. Kind of things clicked, and I got that exciting invitation. So I went to Tanzania. These are some pictures from my first trip there, meeting with the client, the plot. It used to be actually a dense forest, but it's now a settlement. In 1970s, there was a big conflict between Tutsi and Hutu in Burundi, and a lot of people escaped the genocide there to Tanzania, and they were placed in this area. It was a forested area, but throughout the years, they cut most of the greenery to cook, to build houses, and so on. So it's now a very dry, flat land. So I started, again, collecting pieces that we can reconstruct and build the project with, like the pictures of nature and landscape, but also local architecture, local detailing, local colors, local handcrafts. So these local technologies, how they make bricks, how they harvest wood, how can they weld. And then we kind of diagnosed three main issues when it comes to local school typologies that we wanted to deal with. The first was the fact that classes were really, really hot, overheating very easily. It's almost the equator. Just the corrugated steel sheet on the roof acts like an oven. I checked with the thermometer, the ceiling in the classroom sometimes was up to like 60 centigrade. So kids were like falling asleep, and it's not an environment to study at. Second of all, these buildings are just placed on a barren land, and so you're either in a very hot classroom or you're outside in the full sun. There is no diversity of spaces, and we believe that different activities are promoted by different kinds of spaces. So that was the second thing we decided that our project should address. And the third one was the relation between local community and greenery, because we've seen them cut their trees next to their house just to cook another meal, which was giving them shadow, protecting their house from overheating. And there's kind of this relation with nature is not very productive. So the first, the overheating of a classroom was addressed in a quite technological way. It's an idea that was introduced to us by. It's not our idea. There's an architect called Francis Kere from Burkina Faso. He kind of promoted that idea more internationally of these double roofs, where you have the first roof kind of keeps the sun out from the classroom and the rain, but then you have some space between the first roof and the ceiling of the classroom where wind can pass through. So there is no direct transmission of that temperature, of that energy, solar energy, of that heat into the classroom, because there's wind blowing between those two layers. And we have also very big windows that allow for cross ventilation, thick foundations that can keep kind of the thermal mass, so they're getting cold during the night, and they are giving back that cold vibe during the day. The next thing that we did was placed those classrooms next to greenery, because trees create cold air. They're not only giving shadow, but they're also actually creating cold air through evaporative cooling. This is why we sweat. When water evaporates, it needs a lot of energy to change from liquid to gas state, and it gets that energy from the air around the particle of water, cooling the air in the process. So you can actually feel the cold air falling down from the tree when it's a very hot summer day in Ulayankulu. And if you pitch the roof outwards, going up away from the tree, the hot air from the classroom is going to escape that way, sucking in the cold air from underneath the tree into the classroom constantly, creating a passive air conditioning. So we had this big plot to position the building at, and we chose this biggest group of mango trees for the localization of the school. So these are actually 3 big trees that look like one huge tree from a distance, because they kind of connected their branches. So we put all those classrooms around those trees, so each classroom can benefit from that passive cooling method. All of them are one size apart from this big one here, which is the theater classroom. I'll talk about that a little bit more soon. And we were quite happy with that. We already kind of liked it. You can see also that the roofs connect in such a way that we can collect water from them. We have a water storage tank here. And we're pretty happy. We had the greenery in the center, so we kind of highlighted the importance of it. This big courtyard, kind of shaded space for kids to enjoy their free time was there. But as I said, there was a third problem that we wanted to address, the diversity of spaces. And this was addressed in a way, we chose the cheapest local material, the brick that is actually produced on site. On our side, we have a big hole. We just take some clay. It's formed in those wooden forms, dried on the sun, and then burned in like these big piles, fired in those in like these big piles. So we did use this cheapest material, just actually 2% of the whole budget of the project. This additional wall that wraps all the classrooms twice around, and what it creates is every classroom gets kind of like a small patio next to it. So instead of having a possibility of being in either outside of the classroom or inside of the classroom, we have a much more diverse choice. We can be outside of the school in general. You can enter the central big courtyard that we're hopefully gonna act like a gathering place, not only for kids, but for the community around it. We have an ambition that the school should work as a community center as well, especially on the weekends for celebrations or gatherings or discussions. Then you enter a small courtyard, and each courtyard is going to get like a playful activity. So this becomes like a continuous playground around those trees, classrooms. And then you enter the classroom. So you have like 4 choices of different kinds of spaces. So if you want to talk one-on-one with a student as a teacher, you can go into a smaller space, have some calm there. If you want to celebrate something, you can go into a big space. If you want to run around, you go outside of the school. There are different ways of using that space because it gives you possibilities. Yeah, we've built half of it so far. There's some problems now politically there, so we had to stop because we hoped to finish this school this year, but unfortunately COVID and elections in Tanzania, yeah, there are some complications. But hopefully we're going to finish that soon. Half of it is already built. This is, for example, a model we made for local people to understand our ideas before we started construction. It was made out of things we found on a local market, kind of trash. It was quite funky to make it out of the whatever we had there available. And we started building with local workers. As I said, we burned bricks on our site. We actually had this idea to make it as ornamental and playful as we can. So we burned half of the bricks on our side when we had this darker reddish clay, but half of them we asked to be fired in a nearby valley, like 2 kilometers away, where the clay is beige. So we have more like a playful quality to the wall itself. We try to also kind of build it from red brick up to lighter brick on the top, so it would again create this kind of gradient. I think we just like gradients. Hopefully, yeah, you can see that a little bit. Maybe it didn't work out exactly that strong as we wanted, but the playful, colorful quality to the wall is there either way. As you can see, we've built some of the classrooms already. We managed to get these curves that we wanted. This is the first roof. There will be a ceiling over a classroom as well, and the wind will help to ventilate. So the classrooms that are there already being used, but we need still some work to finish. Hopefully, when we're done, this is what it more or less is going to look. The wall that is surrounding the school, it's not supposed to be a wall as a barrier. It's more like a definition of space. So we punctured with a little playful holes so kids can go in and out of the school from every direction. They can jump in, climb in, or kind of crawl in, or the main entrance. This kind of, it's your choice. It's about freedom. It's about possibilities. It's about having fun. This education through theater is about that. It's about enjoying education as a kid in a most playful and productive and an open and collective way. Hopefully, the main courtyard is going to be a gathering place under this beautiful canopy of these huge mango trees. The theater room opens up to the courtyard for different kind of celebrations and plays. And like a month ago, Google Maps updated their maps of that region, and you can already see the school kind of half built. It was quite satisfying to see. Another one, it's just one that I like to talk about because this building, it's like a palm house in Poznań, and when I was a child, I would go there like every week because I was so fascinated with fish. Because one of those pavilions is about aquariums. Each pavilion is a different biotope with palms, with cacti, amazing stuff, old, beautiful building. And roughly 1.5 years ago, I was invited to redesign the aquarium pavilion, which was actually my favorite place to go on a weekend when I was a kid. When I was a kid, my memories of that place was like I was underwater. It was amazing. And now, years after, and I haven't been there for a couple of years, I went there to take these pictures, and I was like, damn, that's not that great. My memory of it was amazing. So I decided I want to kind of redesign it in a way as I remembered it as a kid, entering this underwater world. When I was young, I bought this magazine about aquariums. I was like, I don't know, 12. And there was this aquarium there from a competition called International Planted Aquascaping Contest. So it took me years, and I wanted to master that craft. I've never gotten that good. This is one of my aquariums that I did as a teenager, another one. But that was my thing. And I decided so now in this one, the pieces that were all kind of off-shelf elements that I used for this mostly was my experience. It was my memories or my understanding of aquariums because of the amount of time that I spent doing them, because it really was my big passion as a teenager. And so just to say that these elements that I'm talking about, sometimes they're physical, sometimes they're socio-economical, sometimes they're personal. There's an architect in Ghent who runs it's a practice called I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of that guy now, but he told me once on a consult when I was a student, he asked, do you know what defines a good architect? And I was like trying to figure out something. He said, in my opinion, you have all these things to choose from, what to focus on. The good architect can define those couple of elements. This context, and this context is important, and this defines them precisely. And this later leads to a good project. And then he asked me, do you know what separates good architects from amazing architects? The amazing architects can do that really quickly. That was that simple. Just understanding there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of context. The ones, creative people that can figure out these couple points that are important or that are gonna just work together best. I really liked that approach, and later on saw that I kind of understand it similarly. So sometimes I manage to get those points, sometimes I don't, but I agree with that. So first of all, it's like you're supposed to sit when you're watching an aquarium. That was my experience, and I was like, this is important. And the way it was designed historically, it was that you kind of walked, and all the pavilions in the whole Palm House are designed as like a loop. Only the aquarium pavilion was like a dead-end street and a dead-end street. So the first decision was to kind of correct that and create the same circulatory experience. But then we didn't want people to walk and look at the aquariums. So we decided to create these 4 big kind of auditoriums for the aquariums. We gave each of them different shape and color and quality based on the biotope of the aquarium that they were put in front. A lot of the inspiration you will see here came from another point of reference that we chose, so Pippi Richt and her installations, because I believe, again, going to her shows gives me personally this kind of experience of being very immersed in something and often feeling literally underwater. So there's a lot of rip-off ideas from Pippi Richt here. We created these projections on the ceiling, and these places where you sit are kind of just like as if you were on a piece of a rock or in between some plants or driftwood. You can go underneath aquariums, you can crawl as a kid, you can lay on the ground and look up to the ceiling. You have that projection on the ceiling, which is also projecting through the screen to the floor. So you look at fish, you have projections on you, you have the water surface above you, you're sitting on some kind of weird underwater structure. This was the idea. We even went down to such a detail that we designed each aquarium with choosing what kind of fish is supposed to be there, but this was just me nerding out. One more sculptural project that I would like to share with you guys is the one I did in Portugal this year, called Long Live the Palm. And this is more going to be based on a short story I'm going to share with you. It's quite a random happening that I ended up doing that project. Because I came there to build totems for Aveiro Festival, but then it was COVID reality, there was a lockdown in Poland, so I was very happy to stay longer in Portugal, and I was offered to stay there for an art residency. And then I had a chance to do another project, and on a phone call with the curator of that residency before I went there, Paulina, the curator, mentioned a couple of topics that I could look into, and one of them was like, there's this main square in the town of Agda, which they care for a lot about. It's next to the plaza where all the concerts and things are happening. People are going there very often, and there were these palm trees that came to Agda 15 years ago. They planted them in front of the court. They grew a bit too big, so they replanted them in that main square, and they now died. And everybody's very upset about it because it's this small town, and they are very, they want their main square to look a certain way. And I was like, yeah, it's an interesting topic. We'll see. So that was my perception of that conversation. But the second day after I arrived, Paulina said, and Iwo, today we have a meeting with the mayor next to the palm trees to tell them about your idea. Damn. I wasn't sure that I agreed to that, but I was like, okay, let's do it. So we met with the mayor, and he was a bit surprised that I don't have yet the idea what to do with them. But I told them, give me a couple of days or weeks, and we'll figure it out. So I was working on the totems for the festival and had it in the back of my mind that it's like in a month or so I'll have to deal with the palms. But every 3-4 days they would call me from the mayor's office and they'll be like, Ivo, should we cut the trees? Should we not? What are we doing with them? People are coming to our office, to the town hall, annoyed, like saying, "Oh, it doesn't look good. This is not nice. Do something about it." And so I invited Ola Korbańska to work on that project with me, and we thought it's about a lot of things. But after a couple of weeks of these phone calls, we were like, this is about these phone calls in a way. This is about how unsecure, how annoyed people got with the fact that there is a dead tree in the middle of a town. Because everybody loves nature, or everybody says they love nature. And our observation was that this affection of ours is very, very selective. Nature is a cycle. And it's funny how we just pick a couple of moments of that circle and cherish it. We love the flower when it's blossoming, but when it's done blossoming, we throw it into the trash. We love the tree when it's healthy and vertical, but when it dies or breaks, we clean it up. So we wanted to give these processes that we don't enjoy that often, essentially form that we could cherish, we could enjoy as well. So we decided to cut the palm trees, and the square that they were at was next to a river, and on the opposite side of the river was like a bit wilder landscape, a park-ish type of. So we decided to rebuild those palm trunks with the compost that we created out of those palm trees that we mixed with earth and seeds of local species, and these are the seeds that we used, a couple of species, and we mixed them with local dirt and sand and that palm compost, and we rammed them into these palm trunks again in 1-to-1 scale, in a mirrored version of it on the other side of the river. And it is a little bit about permanent things. It's about how we're not comfortable with things that are falling apart. So if we want to preserve a memory, what we mostly do is build something very permanent, like sculptures out of stone or concrete. We built them with an idea of them falling apart and disappearing as a kind of celebration of these cycles that need to happen. Something needs to fall apart for new things to grow. So the seeds that are mixed within the mix are sprouting and cracking open the sculpture, and the rain and the wind is helping that, and it's falling more and more apart, and the exhibition is going to end the moment these forms become landscape, in a kind of attempt of trying to figure out the potential of letting go of things. So these are the projects I wanted to talk about to you guys today. I hope you enjoyed them, and I'm very happy to answer any questions. And thank you again for inviting me. It's an honor and a pleasure. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Ivo, for your talk today. Very insightful, very knowledgeable, very interesting. We do have a couple of questions from the floor. I'm going to read this one out. We had to ask them actually. It was like a two-part question. So just to a continuation of the same question, but they said, yes, I intend to. Does the front of the building describe the design of the structure of the building? For example, if you see a new front of an apartment, do you think that that inner is the same? Now, that does. I'm not an architect, so it doesn't really make much sense to me, but maybe it does to you.
It's a question that has many answers throughout the history of architecture, as there was this famous quote like forms follows function, or form follows actually no, there was form follows function as the modernist claim, but recently there was this beautiful quote, I don't remember who said that, forms follows fiasco. That's more about this commentary on this kind of architecture that is unnecessarily exciting and grandiose, and so there are different types of architecture, and I like honesty, but I also like ornamental architecture. I also like to think about form as a quality itself, not only an expression of for example, a plan or a structure of a building. So there is no one answer to it. It's depending on what do you want the building to be. And then you need to choose tools that would suit that purpose.
Okay, thank you. Another question's come in from Christine. What artists inspire you outside of architecture and sculpture?
I'm not sure how that translates to what I do as an architect or as a sculptor, but the closest to another kind of artistic outlet of mine is music, and always was. I used to work as a composer. I used to compose mostly for theaters, for dance theaters, contemporary dance, but I also had a band and still compose from time to time. So I find music to be something that I'm very excited and inspired by a lot. This would be the simplest answer. I also do find kind of political conversations inspiring in a way. Like I find it's not an accident that we do start our lectures, because it's not the first time that we start our lecture with some symbols that are very political on a first slide, because this is what is within me, this is within Adam, and we feel that the ideas that are dear to our hearts politically and socially find some outlet in our architectural and sculptural work at some point as well, very directly, like with the totems, with our environmental convictions and the actual meaning of the piece that we built in Poznan in Portugal lately. But not only, it's about architecture, about social equality, where you design a building, the building can be elitist, or can be inviting, or can be democratic, could be accessible to people or not, could be threatening or not. Everything builds community, and communities goes hand in hand with politics. So the political and world and the ideas that are discussed is something that I think has a big influence in our work, in my work as well.
Okay, great. I think Susie has a couple of questions for you.
Yeah, thanks so much for your talk. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you judge the success of a project.
First of all, there's this first moment where it's an inner feeling, where there is a moment where I'm satisfied with the concept, and sometimes it doesn't come, but sometimes it does. And if it doesn't go away in like 48 hours or a week, it means there's this first layer of satisfaction that I'm like, at least I satisfied myself, knowing the context, knowing what I could have done, what were the how much time there was, how much money there was, how much help there was, what were the expectations. Second of all, there's the thing when you look at it after it was done, this feeling, again, more like a subjective stuff. And then we have some more objective ways to do it. For example, with the totems, we could see exactly how many people interacted with the sculptures because of the QR codes. We were quite happy with the numbers there. We had, for example, the one that I liked the most statistically was that if somebody engaged with scanning one sculpture, on average, they engaged with 5 out of 6. So every 6th person scanned one, and 5 out of 6 people would scan all of them if they interacted. So I was very happy with the fact that most of the people were very curious to see, what is the next one about, and what is the next one about. If they scanned one, they wanted to scan all of them, and we had a lot of these just people scanning. It was a big crowd of people that for months that I was looking at the data for the first 6 months, it was roughly 150 people daily average in the city of Poznan of people that were scanning it. So much more people like looked at them, took pictures with them, walked around them, and then 150 people a day engaged with them in a very concrete way of standing there, scanning, reading, going to another. So it was more objective way to see if that works. And then the fourth layer is just opinions that you get from people, like publications and stuff. But these happen or not. So far, I was pretty lucky with the amount of attention that we got media-wise. But you also just work on that. The more you knock on doors, the more doors you get opened. Yeah.
And also, could you talk a little bit about, do you have any advice for any younger, less established architects or architecture students, please?
Yeah, I think one of them would be connected to this fourth layer publications. So whatever you do, try to from the beginning, this is how it works now. I'm not happy about it that much, but this is how it is. Try to, from the beginning of the project, construct the idea of the narrative that you're gonna create for the publishing of it, and work on documenting your process very well, and your process both in like a theoretical, like a conceptual phase up to the realization. So you have a very nice press pack at the end, because it just helps. You can send it to competitions, you can send it to just news outlets, magazines and blogs and stuff. And second of all, though, I can just say a lot of these quite cheesy stuff about being yourself and being brave, but I have never seen a good piece of architecture nor art or music that was not following those basic stuff of just don't be afraid to fail, because that's gonna happen either way. But if you're not gonna try, you might not get a chance to express yourself at all. So I'm not gonna go deep into that because it's gonna turn into a cheesy meme like part of this conversation. But yeah, be brave and do it.
And yeah, I've got a few more, but I'll maybe let other people ask. So my last one for a while is, can you also talk about how you managed to juggle so many different projects at the same time? It seems like you've done so much, and you're very young. So yeah, how do you manage to juggle that, and working internationally in all these different countries? How do you kind of manage that process?
I think what it is I do have I don't think I've never said no to a project. This is the first thing. Like some of the projects I've done looked like they're not interesting from the beginning, and it was just I don't think it was a choice. I'm very bad at letting people down psychologically, I think. So if somebody asks me to do something for them, even if it's really shitty money or not very interesting topic, I tend to do it, and then I'm like not very happy about it, but then I'm also not very happy with delivering something that I don't like. So I ended up doing a lot of projects that were not very interesting, but I did them as well as I could, and then it led me to some other people that had more interesting topics for me. So I think that's this flaw of me that ended up being quite useful as an architect. It doesn't help with your life. It's easy to be a workaholic in that sense, and I do not recommend that to anyone. I think architectural community is running on fumes. It's in crisis for years now. When it comes to how much we work and how much, I think all creatives do that, but I know architecture much like personally, and I know how I've worked in Poland, I've worked in Belgium, I've worked in New York, and I know like everywhere the ethics of how we work are really bad. Young people are working overnight hours, and this is something we need to fix as architects. But sometimes it leads to a lot of stuff done. But I don't know if the price is something, if it's good enough. So it might look good, but I would rather do 20% less and be a bit more rested. Now when I look back at it, but.
That's really interesting and very insightful, Ivo. I have a couple of questions for you. Well, it's one long question. So I wanted to ask you, coming from an architectural background, how is the transformation into sculpture for you? Is it liberating? And what are your thoughts with regards to making sculpture more functional? Does that in turn invert it unintentionally back into architecture and design? What are your thoughts?
So my transition was, I think it started in Cuba with the fact that as an architect student, I was always afraid of color. I think, especially when I studied in an artistic university in Poznań, Poland, the education here was very much based, like we were taught by people that were like 50, 60 years old at the time. So they grew up as architects. Okay, sorry, something was calling here.
Sorry, Ivo, we just lost you there.
Yeah, I think something appeared, like there was like a question if I want to answer a call from a paid number. I don't know what that.
Oh, okay.
I'll go just dive right back in. So I was taught by people that were very happy with teaching us about modernism and minimalism, and there was no conversation about color. And I didn't see that until I went to Cuba, where color is just amazing. People are painting everything with every type of paint. They're using really, really mad colors on one building, 10 different colors on one column, amazing stuff. And I started to feel that there is this freedom that I'm not sharing with the world, that I'm not participating in as an architect taught in that way. So I tried to for that freedom, and sculpture kind of was where being colorful and weird was not frowned upon and was not nonsensical, because also buildings as we deal with form and sculpture is not good. I'm also very aware of the fact that buildings should not try to be too much for buildings. So I was just trying to look for that freedom, and sculpture making has. When it comes to sculpture with function, I'm trying to not do that, especially exactly because of that reason, because it becomes then a piece of furniture or a piece of architecture. But I have nothing against it, but just we need to be aware what it becomes. And sometimes it's better to make a functional object that has beautiful sculptural qualities, even if we don't call it a sculpture later on. I don't know, when you look at Memphis group with their, especially with those patterns and colors, I very much appreciate their furniture. There is so much sculptural quality to what they did. I don't call it sculpture, but it's awesome. It's awesome. So I don't care. I don't think sculpture is better than furniture, or furniture is better than architecture. Be fun. We just need to know what the certain moment and certain place calls for.
So just to go back to the first part of your answer, interesting what you were speaking about with regards to colour, and how you were not so fond of bringing more vibrant colours in. Is that, do you think, a cultural thing? So your cultural experience of going to somewhere so vibrant, such as Cuba, has completely brought about this new phenomenon within your practice of invoking a very wide array of different colours?
Yes, of course. If you look at historic architecture in Europe, it used to be much more colorful than what we do right now. There's some offices that are, especially in London, actually, there is a couple of really nice practices like David Kahn, for example, that are working with color. But if you look at historic architecture, like Old Town of Poznan, even the small tenements building in the old town, they were like pink and yellow and green and orange, and they had these ornaments, and there was funky stuff. And then exactly this sentence, form follows function, that modernism brought, and ornament is a crime, that was said by I think, who was that? Austrian, Viennese architect, Loss, I think. These things were exciting when they were said, and there was very, I think, modernist claims are very valuable, especially about quality of living, about air quality, access to light, access to greenery, hygiene and all of that, efficiency. There's a lot of, but we've lost so much as well. And I think architecture, and me myself personally, I'm trying to kind of dig out those things that we've lost, and work with both qualities, the ones that we've lost and the ones that we gained through the modernist thought.
No, very, very interesting.
How long ago have you seen a pink building?
I can't
like
think
of
the
new pink building, not an old pink building. There's one built in London in King's Cross now, and a beautiful office by Dagan Morris architects. But these are the ones that are.
A great pink building in Spain, but it's called it's actually called the Red House, like Morella Roja, but it's bright pink, and it's
Is it new or historic?
It's newish. It's like social housing just outside a place called Calpe, and it's incredible. Definitely.
I need you to send me the name of that later on, because I'm actually obsessed with pink buildings lately.
Me too.
Especially when we've beautiful. I'm gonna send you, because we've met with Samuel in Portugal, and Portugal has these historic buildings that are pink, like on almost every street in Porto. Damn, this is beautiful. It's a new, or like new, for the last 2 or 3 years, I'm obsessed with pink buildings in general. I really recommend one for everybody to see. They're in New York. Let me just Google what was the exact name. Palazzo, New York. There is this building called, this one. Palazzo Chuppi, CHUPI, in New York. Crazy stuff. An artist built it for himself and sold some apartments there. It's, but yeah, I was walking through Manhattan one day and just went into a street and saw this. Yeah, that was a place to go every time I could to have a sandwich. Just looking at it. I don't know, there's something about it.
I think that leads us on quite nicely to the last question from the chat, which is asking what your dream, if you could do any project anywhere with like blue sky idea, what would it be?
This is a very good question, because I'm gonna so not answer it how you wanted me to, because I believe like this. I've been a part of this panel talk and kind of exhibition in Basel a year ago that was called Re-Architecture, and the exhibition was curated by Annie Lacaton from Lacaton Vassal, a beautiful, really exciting French office. And they said like architecture in school, and this is true, when you study architecture, most of the projects are kind of carte blanche, like you have an empty plot and you have to build something. You can imagine a client, you can imagine a budget, you do design. But in real life, especially now when we didn't have a global war in the last 70 years, there's not much more space to build in. Almost all the projects are refurbishments, kind of reconstructions, additions, expansions. And I find that much, much more exciting than having freedom. Having complex, interesting context is what I would ask for as a perfect project, with respectful clients, respectful in a way that respectful towards the city and towards an environment, and good collaborators. I can't name stuff because I think this is the most exciting when you stumble upon these new contexts and you have to weave in between them and choose this and that and get rid of that. These kind of projects are the ones that I am most excited about. Yeah, that's the way I would answer that.
Brilliant, thank you so much. I think it's probably time to wrap up on that note.
But now I have to say one more thing when I mentioned the Annie Lacaton, because Lacaton Vassal did one thing that I really love everybody to hear. Because architects are considered to be, and rightfully, quite egocentric. And what they did was they were asked for a very prestigious project to reimagine and redo the main square in a big district of Bordeaux. And said there's a lot of money for it. We need new qualities. We need to demolish some buildings. We need to fix the main square, the plaza. And they had a year to develop this master plan, this main idea to how to bring how to make that district new and exciting and great. And they worked for a year, and they went to show that project to the municipality and to the people. And they did a long presentation about how they should not do that. And they got paid for it, and everybody was very satisfied. They were like, no, you don't need to change it. It's working. This lady here is going to buy something in a corner shop. Yeah, maybe we have to clean the park a little bit, add a little bit of benches. Don't spend money on a new exciting refurbishment of a district. It's working. People are happy. And I found that to be one of the most exciting that were done in recent years in Europe, despite the fact it wasn't even a project. And they argued and it's so well that the city was not unhappy. Where is the project? The city was like, thank you, you're right. We should not waste our money on just exciting stuff, because it's not about that. It's about quality, it's about happiness, it's about society. And that's very admirable. So I just like that story, so I wanted to add it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, and thanks for your excellent talk. It was really great to hear more about your practice, and on behalf of Conscious Isolation and University of East London, we'll give you a big round of applause, me and Sam. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. I hope that people that joined, I don't know how many of us were here, enjoyed it as well, and stay safe.
Thanks. Bye.